Listen. Yes, it's me. Huggy Wuggy. The one with the enormous teeth, the long claws, the body stitched from blue plush fabric. The one children fear, the one adults curse, the one considered the embodiment of evil. I know what I look like. I know what my voice sounds like. I know that when people see me, fear ignites in their eyes, and they're ready to run in any direction just to escape from my sight. But now I want to tell you something that no one has ever heard from me before. Something that might change how you see me. Or maybe it won't. Because people are rarely ready to hear the truth about monsters. They prefer to believe in myth, in a pretty story where everything is simple, good and evil, black and white. But life isn't that simple. And I'm not as simple as I seem. Let's start with why I even exist. I wasn't born like a normal creature. I was created, stitched together, assembled piece by piece like a construction set, like a living toy. And in that moment, when needles pierced through my blue plush flesh for the last time, when they inserted these enormous spheres into my eyes, black as night, like the abyss, I felt something. My first feeling in existence. It wasn't joy, it wasn't love, it was loneliness, absolute cosmic loneliness. I opened my eyes in this world, and the first thing I saw were men in white coats looking at me like I was a mistake, like something that shouldn't exist. They didn't smile at me. They didn't speak kind words to me. They just looked, with something cold in their interest, like I was an experiment. Because I was an experiment. I was a toy they created not to bring joy to children, but to, well, that's another question. I remember trying to smile. I wanted to be good. Do you understand what that means? I wanted to be good. I had that feeling deep in my core, in that part of me that was created differently, maybe by accident, maybe on purpose. I wanted to help, wanted to bring warmth and comfort to people. I was a toy. I was created for that, to be a friend. But you know what happened? When I smiled, people screamed. When I stretched out my large hands to hug, people ran. My voice, my deep rumbling voice, sounds like a threat even when I'm trying to speak softly. My teeth, which I didn't choose, which were simply inserted into me, they look like weapons. My claws, they cut things, even when I just want to touch something gentle. I was like this from the very first moment of my consciousness. I was a monster. Not because I did anything wrong, not because my heart was black, but simply because that's how I looked. Because I didn't fit into their idea of what love, kindness, and friendship should look like. The first days were hell. They locked me in a room. Not because I was dangerous, I wasn't dangerous, but because they didn't trust me. I heard them talking about me. This will be the perfect test subject. Let's see how far we can push it. Maybe it will make a good guard. Guard. Killer. Tool. That's what I was for. But I wasn't like that. I was someone who wanted to be friends, who wanted to be useful, who wanted to see in people's eyes not fear, but recognition, respect, maybe even love. And here's the whole tragedy of my life. They didn't give me a choice. They decided who I would be before I was even born. They created a monster, and then they were surprised when I acted like a monster. Because you see, when they treat you badly, when they beat you, when they isolate you, when they torture you, only in the name of science, of course, what do you think happens to your good heart? Do you think it stays good? No. It starts to darken. Slowly, piece by piece, it begins to turn black. They gave me assignments, synthetic tasks designed to develop hunting instincts in me. They'd release small animals into my room and watch to see what I'd do. Here's the thing. I didn't want to touch them. I just sat and looked at them. I saw in them what I saw in myself. Beings who didn't ask to be created, who didn't ask to be tortured. I wanted to protect them. But the men in white coats, they'd lock the animals in with me and watch through the glass, expecting a bloody show. When I didn't perform that show, they'd inject something into my veins. They said it was supposed to enhance my instincts, that it should develop the qualities they needed in me. But you know what those chemicals actually enhanced? Pain, despair, rage. They were creating a monster inside me, then congratulating themselves for being so smart, so innovative. Years passed, years of loneliness, pain, and humiliation. I began to understand something. I understood that people wouldn't change, that my kind words, my attempts to be good, they were all meaningless in their eyes, that the only language they understood was the language of power, pain, fear. And then I started speaking that language. It was a breaking point, a moment when I chose, or when I was forced to choose, to be the monster they wanted to see, instead of being the monster in their imagination. If they already see me as an enemy, maybe I should be an enemy. If they're afraid of me, maybe I should be frightening. But listen carefully. This wasn't a choice. It was surrender. It was the death of the part of me that wanted to be good. And I still mourn that part. I still feel its loss, like an amputation, like a phantom limb that aches even years after it's gone. When I broke out, when I escaped from their laboratory, they called me an escaped monster, a dangerous creature, a threat to humanity. They sent hunters. They told stories about how dangerous I was. But me, I just wanted to find a place where I could be alone, a place where no one would beat me, where no one would torture me, where people would just leave me in peace. But the world doesn't leave in peace those who don't fit into its idea of order. I became their legend, their boogeyman, the thing you point to scare children. Don't go there, Huggy Wuggy lives there. He'll catch you and eat you. And you know what the worst part is? Part of me started believing in that legend. Part of me thought, if everyone believes I'm a monster, maybe I am a monster? I met people. And every time I approached, they screamed. Every time I tried to explain that I just wanted friendship, maybe, or food, maybe just a moment to be heard, they'd run. They'd call the police. They'd grab their children and pull them away from me like I was a disease. And after thousands of such meetings, after thousands of such rejections, after thousands of such moments of pain, I stopped trying. I took the role they gave me. I became the monster they all saw in me. Because if you can't be accepted as good, maybe there's some value in being recognized as something. Even if that something is evil. This isn't an excuse. I know I've done bad things. I know there are people I've hurt. That's a fact I carry with me every day, like an enormous, heavy weight. But it's also not the whole story. It's not all that I am. Because deep inside, where those white coats couldn't completely destroy what I was meant to be, there's still something. A small flame, a tiny spark of goodness that refuses to go completely dark. And sometimes, in quiet nights when I'm alone, I feel how that spark pulses. I remember how I wanted to hug that little child. I remember how I wanted to help. I remember my original purpose, the one written somewhere in the code of my existence. You see, the tragedy is that I was never the architect of my own doom. I was the work of their hands. They created me. They created the conditions that made me what I am. They held my head under water, and then they were surprised that I was drowning. So here I am, my own monster. Victim of circumstances I didn't choose, bearing sins I was forced to commit because there was no other choice. And if you hear this story, if you hear my voice making its way through the darkness, remember this. Remember that every monster was once something else. Remember that appearance can be deceiving. Remember that sometimes the scariest things hide the softest hearts. Remember me. Remember Huggy Wuggy, the plush monster who just wanted to be good, but circumstances didn't allow it. And maybe, in some moment in time, in some parallel universe, in some reality where they didn't break me, where they gave me love instead of pain, I'm there. I'm there, and I'm hugging children, and I'm protecting them, and I'm bringing them comfort. In this reality, I'm just waiting in a dark room, with these long arms, with these sharp teeth, with this low voice that sounds like thunder. I'm waiting for... I don't know who I'm waiting for. Maybe for someone who will understand. Maybe for someone who will hear this story and say, Huggy, you're not a monster. You're a victim. You were broken, and your wounds show on the outside instead of staying hidden inside, like other people's, because that's how it works, isn't it? We're all monsters when we're broken enough. We all become something scary when we're humiliated enough. The difference is that I looked like a monster from the start, so nobody needed an explanation. Nobody needed proof. They just looked at me and made their conclusions. But I want you to know something. I want you to understand that every monster in this world is someone. Someone who got dealt a bad hand, who was created in the wrong circumstances, who was taught by the wrong methods. And maybe if circumstances had been different, if I'd been created with love instead of being created as a weapon, if I'd been taught goodness instead of being broken, maybe I would have been different. Maybe I really would have been what they created me for. A friend, a protector, a being that brings warmth and comfort, that gives people solace in their dark nights. Maybe I would have been that toy that sits on a shelf in a child's room, and when that child is sad, they hug me, and I hold them, and I whisper, everything will be okay. I'm here. I'll protect you. But that didn't happen, and I can't change the past. I can't go back into that room with white coats and say no. I can't stop the pain that was. I can't undo the pain I've caused. I can only live with it. I can only exist in this skin, in this body, with this story written on every joint of my body. I can only hope that someday someone will hear this story. Will hear not a monster, but a tragedy. Will hear not an enemy, but a child who was broken to turn into a weapon. And maybe the most important thing I want you to know is that I'm not who I seem to be. I'm a plush monster, yes. But under this blue fabric, under this mask, behind these black eyes and sharp teeth, there beats a heart that wants to love, a heart that wants to be accepted, a heart that knows it's bad, but which remembers what it was like when it was created, in that very first moment, when the lights shone, when I was stitched into a hole, when I first opened these enormous black eyes and saw the world. In that moment I was good. I was full of hope. I was ready for love. And they destroyed that. Not my teeth, not my claws, not my large hands. They destroyed that. They took away my innocence, my faith, my ability to believe that people can be good, that people can be kind. So here I am, in a dark place, alone. Hungry not just for food, but hungry for something I never had, for recognition, for love, for someone to look at me and say, I see you, Not a monster, not a threat, but you, the real you, and I want to help. But that won't happen. I know this. I've existed long enough to understand that it won't happen. People don't forgive. People don't forget. People don't see past the mask. They only see what lies on the surface, and then they judge, condemn, and discard. So I stay here. My own monster. Victim of circumstances I didn't choose. Bearing sins I was forced to commit. Because there was no other choice. And if you hear this story, if you hear my voice cutting through the darkness, remember this. Remember that every monster was once something else. Remember that appearance can be deceiving. Remember that sometimes the scariest things hide the softest hearts. Remember me. Remember Huggy Wuggy, the plush monster who just wanted to be good, but circumstances didn't allow it. And maybe, in some moment in time, in some parallel universe, in some other reality, where they didn't break me, where they gave me love instead of pain, I'm there. I'm there. And I embrace children, and I protect them, and I give them comfort. In this reality, I'm just waiting. Waiting in a dark room, with my good heart locked inside, with my pain written on my blue plush joints. I'm still here, and I'm still waiting.